Welcome everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Eugene Safanov. I'm part of the marketing team at Proficient, and I'm very excited that you've joined us for today's webinar, in which we'll discuss leveraging Oracle IDMP Enterprise Foundation Suite for regulatory compliance. Before we move on to a brief overview of Proficient, I'll mention that we are recording today, so in the next day or so, we'll be sure to email you with information on how to access this presentation. Also, time permitting, we will answer questions at the end of the presentation, so please type your questions into the chat box on the bottom left corner of your screen. All right, let's move on to About Proficient. So who are we? We are a consulting firm that delivers digital experience, business optimization, and industry solutions. The work we do helps cultivate and captivate customers as well as drive efficiency and productivity. We have numerous locations across the US, Europe, as well as offshore facilities in India and China, as you can see from the map here. A couple of facts. We were founded in 1997. We're a public company that's traded on the NASDAQ, and we have more than 3,000 employees. We've also formed strategic partnerships with each of the major technology vendors and also have dedicated solution and industry practices. All right, now that I've covered the housekeeping items and told you a little bit about our company, I'd like to pass it over to our first speaker today, Mark Thackstone.
Thank you, Eugene. It's very good to be able to talk to everybody on the call today. My name is Mark Thackstone. I'm a senior business analyst at Proficient, and I've been at Proficient for a year. And I've been working in the EVMPD IDMP arena for, I think, as far back as 2009. It's kind of lost in the dawn of time. Just a quick look at the agenda. So I am going to kick off the first portion, and I'm going to give you a quick overview and an introduction to IDMP in Article 57, just so everybody's on the same page. I'm pretty sure everybody knows what the deal is with IDMP now. I'm going to look at some recently released information from the EMEA about SPOR, and then the bulk of my presentation is going to be looking at project planning for IDMP, and it'll be a quick summary, and then I'm going to hand over to Michael, who's going to talk about Oracle's offering as a solution, and you'll be able to see how that fits in with the demands you're going to have for the project management. So I've got quite a few slides, so I'm going to dive straight in. So basically, a little bit of history about IDMP. Since the 80s, there's been a large number of safety databases growing in size, holding huge amounts of information, but there was no common standard, and this was handicapping a regulator's ability to investigate that information and conduct meta-analysis. So a common standard was identified, and that was called ISO IDMP, or Identification of Medical Products. So in Europe, the IDMP initiative fell under an initiative of the European Union telemetric strategy, and basically it was alongside several other initiatives, but the intention was for all parts of the organization of the industry and the regulators to get together and populate the IDMP dictionary. And I think that probably the best way to think of IDMP is if it is a dictionary itself, and it will contain all the information about all the products licensed within Europe. The EMEA has provided the book and the language that you need to write in, but it's up to the marketing authorization holders and the sponsors themselves to write the text for all the products that they have licensed in Europe. So IDMP is hopefully the last iteration of a process that started off with EVMPD. Since 2012, it's been a requirement for marketing authorizations in Europe to populate the dictionary according to the standard called EVMPD. And in 2014, that was upgraded to a new standard, which was an extended version of that standard, XEVMPD. And now we are on the cusp of moving towards an ISO standard. Supposedly, that should have happened in July 2016 last year, but for various reasons, that was not achieved. The 2016 date was stipulated in the regulations, so but luckily nobody's going to be held account for not achieving that deadline. So basically IDMP is an extended version of EMPD. It's the application of the ISO standards from to Article 57 product data collection, and it was basically developed in response to the worldwide demand for an international harmonized specification for medicinal products. So ISO standards is a group of 5 standards which provide a basis for unique identification of medical products. And it provides data elements and structures for unique identification and exchange. The ISO standards actually come from the International Standards Organization. I'm not going to call out each of them there, but the best way of thinking about them is the standards, when pulled together, will describe every single aspect of how you could describe a medicinal product. And if you have a quick look at this slide, you can see in the center you've got a product, and in the packaging you have the strip of medicines and the tablets. You can take the tablets out, and then the tablets themselves have chemicals in them. The important thing to understand about the ISO standard is that they cover how to describe every single different aspect of what you can see there. I can't think of a way you could describe a medicinal product which wouldn't be covered by the standard. So you could describe a product as a blue pill. The ISO standard tells you how to describe a blue pill. Or you could say a product has a specific chemical in it. The ISO standard will tell you how to describe that chemical. So what you can see there, the box, the strip of medicines, the pills, and the chemicals, in a schematic view, that would look something like this, where all the different entities within the product are listed out and linked as appropriate, and you can dive through the structure to different levels. So I hope that wasn't too quick, but that's a brief introduction to IDMP. So I want to talk to you briefly about SPOR, which is an initiative from the EMEA to take control of the data for substances, products, organizations, and referentials. One thing that came apparent from early iterations of IDMP the EVMPD iterations, is that there's a large amount of data that is common or shared. Some of these data types are well defined and controlled and already in dictionaries and code lists, such as MEDRA and international units and ATC codes. And where these exist, IDMP adopts them. However, there are some common data points, but they're not defined. And one of the lessons from previous iterations is that this could get very confusing and complicated, so the EMEA have accepted responsibility for organizing and harmonizing the codes for the data points for such databases. So I think I mentioned before, but the SPOR elements are substances. So those are the ingredients for medicines, products. The P is the products, describing the marketing and medicinal information relating to the product. Organizations, and these are how we describe manufacturers or the sponsors of the products. And referentials are things that we need to use in controlled vocabulary, such as dose forms, pharmaceutical forms, country codes, package codes, and weight codes for the medicines. So, as the EMEA have taken control of the SPOR implementation, it's going to be a change of process, and that was, sorry, I skipped a slide by mistake. That their proposal for how this is going to be managed was published on the 1st of December last year, and it's a transition. This is how they intend to move from the old system in EVMPD of creating the SPOR data to the new system. So if we look at the old or current process, how SPOR data was created, now there is one exception to this, but I'll cover that in a moment, is when you wanted to create one of the new SPOR data codes, such as, say you had a new marketing authorization holder, what you would do is you would create your XML with your IDMP message, you'd add a temporary code for the manufacturer, and you would send that off to the EMEA. They would load it into their database and send you back an EV code. So you used to have a single loop process, and once you got that EV code, you'd use that in all future messages when you wanted to talk about that particular new MAH. So that's the old system, unfortunately. Then the proposal, I think it might be a slightly retrograde step in my opinion. When you get a new MAH, you're now going to have to email the details to the EMEA, to, in this case, the Organization Management Service. They will then email you back an EV code. That EV code would then have to be loaded into IDMP, and then you will be able to create your XML message, and you submit this. So that's all well and good, but I think it's a movement away from utilizing the full strength of the XML system, and it means that you're going to have more problems managing this because you're going to have to rely on email communications, etc. The one exception that I mentioned earlier is substances. Already you have to request those by email, and there's going to be an interim step with the substances where you're going to have to submit, instead of an email, you're going to have to raise a query on the EMEA portal and communicate that way because the substance team hasn't been created yet, so they don't have an email. Okay, so I think the important thing to note about this is you can see the complexity of that's been introduced into IDMP, and this is something you're going to have to think about very carefully when you're doing your project management, because you're going to have to manage all these communications so that you have the information you need so that you can be compliant with the reporting timelines. So moving on to the next part of my talk, we'll look at how you're going to achieve that compliance. And I'm going to take it right back to the beginning, and then we're going to build up and move through the different concepts that you're going to have to address to be able to achieve compliance. So if we just have a quick look at the process, what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to gather all your information, some of which may still be on paper. you're going to have to get that information to a staging area and turn it into IDMP information. Then you're going to have to database it and then export it to the IDMP database at the EMEA. So that's a fairly simple through process. But to build that initially is going to undertake quite a lot of effort. And so we were thinking about that at Proficient and with our colleagues at Oracle, and we were thinking, well, we need to look at the project plan that you might want to follow to achieve building this process. So we broke the process down into a beginning phase, a gap analysis, a design phase where you're going to come up with your solution, then moving into the work phase where you're going to gather the data into one place and build the technical solution. And then you're going to deliver your solution, i.e. send the IDMP messages, and then you're going to move into a maintenance phase. So if we go through each one of those phases in turn. First of all, with gap analysis, it's where you're starting off. You need to know where you are in terms of compliance and how far away you are from achieving the delivery of IDMP. And there's three buckets which you need to look at. The first is technical. You need to have an inventory of your systems and databases. What is your current IDMP system? Or you might have an existing EVMPD system. So you need to look at where your data is, how you're going to get into one place, and what you can hold it in. And also you need to look at your project management systems. There's going to be a lot of moving parts. Even if you're a small company, project management is still going to be challenging because you'll have fewer resources. In large companies, you'll have more resources, but you'll have more to do. So you need an effective project management system to control all the different moving parts. You have to look for your data. You have to identify where it is and what format it is. If it's in paper, you're much further away from achieving compliance than if you have structured electronic data. Paper data is going to have to be database first, whereas if you have data in an electronic format, you might be able to transform it into data that's compliant with the IDMP standards. And then you should look at resource. Do you have the budget? Hopefully, budgets are particularly important because you need to plan a year in advance. Otherwise, your accountant set. And you should be well into identifying how much money you need to achieve IDMP compliance. You're going to have to work out how much time it's going to take and how many people, how many full-time equivalents you're going to need, and what departments and teams are going to be affected and involved. So once you've got all that information, you've got a very good idea of where you're starting from and what you've got available to use to build your IDMP solution. So next step is you need to design the solution and put together a plan. You've got to work out who's going to come up with the solution. You need to look at what expertise do you have for that. Do you need to get consultant support? What strategy are you going to adopt? I talked about that in more detail in my previous webinar, which is available on the Proficient website if you're interested. And what direction does your gap analysis point you? So, if you're already using a certain type of database, you probably want to have a solution that fits with that database. So once you come up with your plan, you then move into two parallel processes. You need to purchase, install, validate your technical solution, the data warehouse that's going to hold the IDMP data, and the system that's going to create the XML message and transmit it. Then you're going to have to make sure it's validated and behaving as you expected. You probably have to integrate with various other systems and ensure that those linkages and those communications work as you expect them to. Then in parallel to that, you need to look at the data gathering. You need to get the data in one place or be able to pull it into one place. You'll have data that's already in IDMP format, so that's all well and good. It's probably already on your EVMPD database. There's data that needs to be mapped or transformed into the IDMP format. You might need specialist help to do that. And you will probably have data that needs to be rekeyed. So you're going to need people to type that in. And also, as I was talking about earlier, you're going to have to request your SPOR codes. So you need to make sure that all your organizations are listed with the EMEA and you've got codes for all your different affiliates and licensee holders. And then you need to make sure that they're in your IDMP solution. So, and if you're an innovator company, you'll have to request all your development codes for all your developmental drugs. The next phase is you need to actually submit the XMLs and monitor the Act's compliance. So that's actually when you send the IDMP reports for each individual product. It could be quite a big initial load, and making sure that everything is acknowledged by the EMEA and you get an 01 compliant Act back from that. And then the final phase is you need to move into your post-launch maintenance phase. You'll continue to get new licenses that need to be added, but the existing licenses will need to be updated for two reasons. First, you'll be getting more approvals in more countries. You may be changing things like indications, or you may need to update, not initially, but things like the safety profile for the drug. And also, you'll need to maintain the data because IDMP has been rolled out in a series of iterations. So there'll be future changes and updates you'll need to make to each and every record. And you'll have to, and also in maintenance, you'll need to decide who's going to do this. Is it going to be your regulatory group? Is it going to be the safety team, or are you going to create a new department with its own IDMP team to manage that data? So it's going to be a very complex, multifaceted project with very challenging timelines. So you're going to need to have a good project management team. So you're going to need a good steering committee, good links to your senior management, and somebody dynamic and effective in keeping things moving and keeping everybody on board. Great. So I hope that gives people an idea of what they need to be thinking about in making sure they're ready for IDMP. So just to close out my section before I hand over to Michael, it's probably a good idea to have a review of where you are in terms of IDMP compliance. Have you completed your gap analysis? There are Proficient and Oracle are available with consultants to assist you complete this activity expeditiously. Do you have data that needs to be transformed that is useful for IDMP? Bear in mind that, and Mike will talk about the Oracle offering, but there are ways of utilizing data that isn't completely compliant with IDMP. Do you have a technical solution for creating and submitting IDMP messages? Please feel free to talk to us about selecting, installation, or validation of a solution. And do you have the oversight of your compliance? Do you have the project management tools to make sure that you're in control of your IDMP project? So just keep those thoughts in mind, think what your answers are to them. And with that, I'll hand over to Michael.
Thank you, Mark. So I'm Michael Brembogos. I'm Director of Safety Analytics at Oracle Health Sciences. I'm part of the product strategy team, and in product strategy, we basically create the 5-year roadmap for our applications. So where do we want to go over the next 5 years? And of course, in that capacity, we're very closely following upcoming and changing regulations such as IDMP to make sure that our products support them. I've been working in safety and pharmacovigilance for the past 22 years. I started off at Fujisawa, which became Astellas, and I was working there for 13 years in the European headquarters in the pharmacovigilance department, and then was with Relsis, which was the vendor of Argus, and which was then acquired by Oracle. So I've been with Oracle for about 8 years now. And Oracle, let me talk a little bit about the scale. As you know, Oracle is a very large IT company with over $38 billion in revenue. We have over 130,000 employees worldwide, and we do invest around $5 billion in R&D every year. You may know about Oracle Database, but we actually have a global business unit within Oracle that's almost like a company within a company called Oracle Health Sciences. And we just focus on life sciences and healthcare products there. So we do have the #1 clinical development software and the number one safety software in the world. Oracle has been identified by IDC Health Insights as the #1 life science software vendor since almost a decade. In every report that IDC Health Insights has published since they started these vendor assessments, Oracle has come out on top. So let me talk about our solution for IDMP, which we call the Oracle IDMP Enterprise Foundation Suite. It really consists of 3 main components, PLM, TMS, and Argus, which I'll talk about in more detail on the upcoming slides. But the suite really allows you to comply with IDMP. And our 3 differentiators, when you hear about IDMP solutions, I think we have 3 differentiators, which are shown here on the right. The first one is the ability to go beyond just the data. So when you hear about IDMP solutions, you'll hear a lot about MDM, Master Data Management, which is certainly an important part of IDMP because you're automatically bringing the data together. But our solution allows you not to only just bring the data together, but also the business processes from currently siloed departments, because typically you will find that the IDMP data, the sources that you'll need for putting together the IDMP data, are strewn across the company in different departments that are typically not talking to one another today. And there has to be a process in order to bring that data together and to approve the IDMP records, and our solution takes that into account. It also allows you to go beyond just regulatory affairs. So I mentioned those various siloed departments. Could be 10, 15 departments where the data is sitting. But often when you hear about solutions for IDMP, you'll only hear about the solution for regulatory affairs. And that's certainly an important part, because regulatory affairs will typically be submitting the IDMP product data to the EMA and to other health authorities as they come online with IDMP. But there's also a compliance issue for safety. So if the safety department is sending E2B R3 reports to the EMA and IDMP information is available for the products in those reports, then they have to be identifying the IDMP IDs as well. So it's not just a compliance issue for regulatory affairs, but for safety as well. And our solution takes that into account. And finally, our solution allows you to go beyond just IDMP. So as Mark was talking about, this is going to be a big project involving multiple departments and a lot of effort to put this data together. And we feel that you should be able to take advantage of that infrastructure that you put in place and all that work that you've done to go beyond just IDMP compliance. So you'll definitely get there with our solution to IDMP compliance, but then you can use the same components, the same solution to gain additional benefits. So our IDMP Enterprise Foundation Suite really tries to cover the end-to-end IDMP requirements. That includes all of those stages that Mark was talking about. So gathering the data together, extracting it from its various data sources, transforming the data into the IDMP data model, cleansing the data, and then obviously sending the product information to the EMA and other health authorities as they come online with IDMP. But also then the safety aspect, so sending E2BR3 messages with IDMP information in them. When we were putting our solution together, we did not want to go and create new applications for IDMP because those would be 1.0 applications, and we wouldn't know how well they would work, and they would need time to shake out bugs and things like that. So we decided to look around and use existing applications that were already mature, that were already successful, already being used on the market for over 10 years and are best in breed in what they do already. Because although IDMP, the specifics of IDMP are new, what's trying to be done with IDMP to standardize information is really an old concept and one that's been repeated in many different industries, in fact. And so we picked solutions that were already out there and three components: PLM, which is our product lifecycle management system; TMS, which is our Thesaurus management system; and Argus, which is our safety system. Now, I talked a little bit about how the different siloed departments will have to work together with IDMP. So if you could imagine that maybe 10 different departments own the various IDMP attributes now, different subsets of the data. And so maybe each department will have 1/10 of the data, let's say, for simplicity purposes. When you put all that data together into one IDMP record, who's going to own that data? Who's going to approve the IDMP record? That includes not just the 1/10 of the data that Department A owns, but includes the 100% of the data. Will each department approve their own subset of the data, or will there be somebody approving the entire IDMP record before it goes out the door and gets sent to the health authorities? So you're going to have some business processes in place there. And you can match those business processes in the workflows of our solution. So even multidisciplinary approvals where you have several departments making approvals either in parallel or one after the other, that can be implemented in our solution to mirror the business process that you're going to use. another advantage, since we're using products that are not built specifically for IDMP, is that these products all support multiple data models and terminologies, so not just IDMP. So for example, there is another standard UDI, unique device identification, which is for medical devices. It's kind of the IDMP for medical devices. If you manufacture both drugs and devices, you may need to support both IDMP and UDI. And our solutions can support other data models such as UDI or any company-specific, either standard models like UDI or company-specific custom fields that you need to maintain about the products. All of those can be maintained in these applications as well, since they're not specific to IDMP. And that brings up another advantage. Since these are commercial off-the-shelf applications, that means that IDMP is just a configuration within these applications. So in other words, as IDMP changes going forward, and we know it will change, we know that it will go through multiple iterations in the future, we anticipate being able to just tweak the configurations that we already have within the product, and it won't be necessary to release lots of different product releases to get you updated with each change. In other words, it would just be a configuration change. You wouldn't have to go through multiple product upgrades as the different IDMP iterations come out. So let me start to talk about the individual components, and the first one I'll focus on is Oracle Product Lifecycle Management, or PLM. So PLM is an application that centrally manages any attributes of any product throughout its entire life cycle, from discovery through end of life through discontinuation of the product. And in fact, it doesn't have to be a medicinal product. Oracle PLM is used by many industries. For instance, the technology industry. So Apple uses Oracle PLM, for example, to manage its products. But it's also used, for instance, by medical device companies for managing that UDI standard that I talked about, complying with UDI, which has come out a couple of years earlier than IDMP. So PLM acts as that central hub that Mark was talking about, or the data vault, as he called it, where all of the company's information in IDMP format is then stored for all of its products. As part of its capabilities, it includes MDM, or Master Data Management, as Mark was discussing. So it's bringing the data from the various sources, and that can be done automatically through importing the data from the sources. It can also be entered manually, because PLM has a UI, or a user interface, that allows you to enter the data by hand. So, as you're waiting for those integrations and extractions and transformations to happen, as you're putting your MDM project in place, if you decide to go down that route, you can already start entering data by hand while that project goes on in parallel, and that might take a while, let's say, until you've got the automated intake up and running. But you can already get started with the manual entry. Now, what's very important about PLM is that a lot of people are working towards this initial creation of the IDMP record. So, looking throughout the company, finding all the data and putting it together, and okay, this is my product information now. It's all up to date. But what people forget is that that product information is going to change. So after you go live with IDMP, there will just be natural changes to various parts of the product information, which could originate anywhere in the company. And PLM is really good at that change management, so taking care of those different changes, approving them, or allowing the right people to approve the changes, and can handle multiple changes, for example, coming perhaps from different parts of the company around the same time. You know, are you going to make each change and then send it to the EMA one by one? Or are you going to make multiple changes within a short time and then you know, put all those changes into one new message that you send to the EMA? So all those kinds of questions and workflows and processes can be handled very well by PLM. That's what it excels in. You can have the approval workflows that are either simple or complex. You can include users in PLM that are not just the regulatory affairs users, but the users from the various departments that own the IDMP data or that own the subsets of the data. So they can, you know, come into PLM and they can either have access to all the IDMP data or just their subset of the data, and they could be set up, for example, to just be able to approve their parts of the data that they own. Of course, PLM will then generate the IDMP message that goes to the regulators, and PLM can also, as I mentioned, support other data fields that go beyond IDMP. So if you have to comply with any other standards, or if you have additional fields you'd like to maintain that are specific to your company, those can be added as part of the configuration. And there is a lot of additional functionality in PLM, such as project management capabilities. So for instance, let's say you would change the artwork of the product packaging. Then you might want to plan that, you know, who's going to do that, when does it need to be done by, and you can set up all that product planning within PLM, for example. There's change planning and things like that. So there's a lot of capabilities that go beyond just IDMP. Let me next talk about TMS, which is the Oracle Thesaurus management system. That's really centrally managing any dictionaries and also versions of those dictionaries. And those can be standard dictionaries such as Medra, SNOMED, WhoDrug, WhoArt, CoStart, ICD-10, Loink, Mesh, UDI. They can also be company-specific dictionaries, and really can be any number. So we have customers who are maintaining thousands of dictionaries in TMS. And what TMS will do specific to IDMP is combine the IDMP records from PLM, which are the company products, and it will combine those with non-company products, the IDMP records for non-company products. And those records will come from the health authorities, from their websites. Now, why do you want to do this? Because for safety purposes and perhaps for other purposes, you need to code not just the company products, but the non-company products against IDMP. So that information will come from the health authorities. They're going to make the IDMP information public. So TMS will bring those two sides of IDMP together, the company products and the non-company products, and in effect create a global IDMP dictionary for your company. And then users in Argus and potentially other applications as well would then use TMS to look up the IDs that they need, and then they would be able to code products against IDMP and other dictionaries that are in TMS, as well as medical terms against medical dictionaries such as Medra. TMS also supports cross-dictionary mapping. So that means that, for example, when IDMP comes along and finally goes live, that does not mean that WHO drug will go out of existence, right? So WHO drug will still be in use for many years in the future, presumably. And you don't want to have your users code twice. So take a product and first code it in IDMP, let's say, and then code it against WHO drug. That would be double the work. What you can do is have a mapping between IDMP and WHO drug in TMS. Then the user will just have to code once, and then they'll get both codes from both dictionaries back. So they just do the work of coding once and get all of the IDs that they need. Another advantage of TMS is that it will support those medical dictionaries such as MEDRA and SNOMED, which are also going to be used in IDMP. And then as you're taking your IDMP unstructured data in your documents, such as SPCs, and turning them into structured data to put into PLM, you can use TMS as a lookup for the MEDRA code. So as an example, let's say you have your undesirable effects listed in your SPCs, and that's the source of your undesirable effects for the IDMP information. That's, of course, in text format in your SPCs. So as you're putting them into the IDMP record, you'll want to look up those terms in MEDRA and make sure that they're proper, MEDRA preferred terms. And since the MEDRA dictionary would be in TMS, it can also help there with the extraction and transformation of unstructured data to structured data. And finally, I'll talk about Argus. Argus is our safety database. It's used for centrally managing adverse events for all drugs, vaccines, and medical devices throughout the entire life cycle of those products, so from clinical trials through post-marketing surveillance. And Argus allows IDMP IDs to be populated for both company and non-company products, which is to allow compliance with the EMA, what the EMA is saying about E2BR3 messages. When IDMP goes live, then if you are sending E2BR3 messages to EMA as your safety reports, then EMA is going to want to have those products identified as specifically as possible, or as specifically as they've been reported, with IDMP identifiers. And EMA wants both company products and non-company products to be coded. Then Argus will generate those E2BR3 messages, which will then include the IDMP fields that you've populated. And it will also track those E2BR3 submissions, including the acknowledgments that you get back from the EMA or other regulators. And it will also provide you with compliance metrics for those submissions. So in effect, Argus is keeping the safety department then compliant with regulations, including IDMP. And of course, like the other products in our suite, it offers many additional functionalities that go above and beyond IDMP and E2BR3, including periodic reporting, business intelligence capabilities, a case processing workflow, and support of the Japan operations and entering adverse events in the Japanese language. And I think that was my last slide, so let me turn it back over to Eugene.
Perfect. Thank you, Michael. All right, so in the meantime, if you have questions, feel free to submit them in the chat box on the left-hand side of your screen, and we'll answer them as we get them. Just before we move on to the Q&A session, if you do want a demo of the overall Oracle IDMP solution or one of the specific applications or aspects of the system, feel free to email this email address on your screen. It's lifesciencesinfo@perficient.com. Or if you just have general information relating to IDMP or really anything else that's related to your clinical and safety environments, feel free to email us. All right, so there were a couple of questions that were asked during the presentation, and I think some of those questions were answered. So we're just going to go ahead and move on to the questions that may not have been addressed. We'll start with this first one. Which Argus version will support IDMP potentially 8.1? Question mark. And I'll let you guys go ahead.
Yes. Yeah, I'll take that one. So yes, it's Argus version 8.1, which was just released last September, so 2016, and that has the IDMP fields that are listed in the EU ICSR implementation guide. So it's it's not the full set of hundreds of IDMP fields, but it's those, I think, 15 or 16 fields that are required to produce a compliant E2BR3 to the EMA.
Great. And we just had the exact same question again, so we're not going to answer that. We'll give it another minute or so to see if we have more questions. As we give some more time for questions, I'll go ahead and let you know that we have 2 upcoming webinars. One is scheduled for January 26th, and that's going to discuss the pharma and the patient relationship in the digital world. And in March, we will be discussing how sponsors and CROs interact with clinical sites. And you can register on Perficient's website. All right, a couple more questions came in. The question is, can Perficient support us through all areas for process and technology requirements? I'll let Mark go ahead. You can probably answer that one.
Yeah, Perficient's is a very broad-based company, so there's very little that we can't help you with. Each company is going to have their own special needs, but with our expertise in technology and our experience with IDMP, it shouldn't be a problem meeting your needs. And that includes things like doing the gap analysis, identifying what your technological needs, how you could leverage your existing systems, and putting together a project plan to achieve compliance.
Great, thank you. There are a couple of questions I can tell that have to do with the timeline. So what is the timeline for requirements for the FDA and then the EMA? Can you repeat that, please?
I am not up to speed with the EMA timelines. Sorry, the FDA timelines. The EMA timelines it's a series of iterations. So when complete compliance needs to be achieved, is not actually cast in stone yet. But for the next phase, which is the SPOR compliance with SPOR data, I'm pretty sure it's the second half of this year, and it's not. There isn't a more specific date than that.
I think it's this year for the organizations and referentials, and then the substances and products. The first iteration will be in 2018. So I think they're saying the first half of 2018 would be sort of go live of the EMA system. So it would be optional at that point to send either IDMP format or continue to send XEVMPD. And then by the end of 2018, it should become mandatory Now those can change again, of course, but those, I believe, are the current timeline. So by the end of 2018, it's probably going to be mandatory for the first iteration of substances and products. And it's not all of the IDMP fields, but it's I think the 79 fields or so that they're talking about for the first iteration. For the FDA, I believe it's going to, they've got a little bit of a different story than EMA, because FDA made sure that IDMP and HL7 are compatible since the beginning. So, and since FDA systems are already HL7 compatible, they're just doing some kind of behind-the-scenes tweaks to their systems, and I think they're planning to announce this year sometime that there'll be an announcement. As of today, all of the FDA systems are IDMP compatible, and you as a pharmaceutical company will basically continue just doing what you do already with the FDA. So, submitting SPL data, and it will sort of automatically be IDMP compliant. Or you may have to make some small changes, but it's not nowhere on the scale as FDA, as EMA is requiring changes. And I believe PMDA is also involved in the Japan authority is also involved in the IDMP discussions, but they're probably third on the priority after EMA and FDA. I know Health Canada is also looking closely into IDMP in the last couple of months, and they will probably announce a strategy soon.
Perfect. I think we have time for one more question. For those using previous versions of Argus, will there be patches available, or will companies need to upgrade? It will need to be an upgrade because those are actual database changes. So we've actually added in, additional fields to Argus to support the IDMP fields, so that database level changes like that are not supportable with the patch. So companies will need to upgrade. Great, thank you. So I put our Proficient's email address. If you have any more questions, feel free to send us a note, and we'll work with Oracle to provide answers to your needs. I'd like to thank everybody for attending today's webinar. As a reminder, we'll be sending out a link to the recording along with a link to the presentation, the PDF presentation itself. So you should receive that either tomorrow or Monday at the very latest. Feel free to share with your colleagues as well. So again, thank you so much for joining, and we look forward to having you join future webinars. And thank you to our presenters, Mark and Michael. We appreciate it. Thank you.